All right. I think we are live here. Hopefully, you could see this on Facebook and YouTube and somehow Twitch. I'm really excited to do this. We have so many interesting people that I'm excited to talk to. I think you will enjoy hearing from them as well. And let me point out that this is all a fundraiser. It's a fundraiser for the Association of Secular Elected Officials. It's an organization that kind of brings together a lot of people who are in political office everywhere from very local government to state legislatures and beyond. And, we for several years now, as this has been a thing people kind of keep track of, it's been interesting on my end to see how many candidates there are who are very open about being non religious. They don't see it as a problem. Whereas, few decades ago, it would have been like political poison in a sense. And now, because there are so many more Americans who are non religious, a candidate who says, I don't happen to believe in any God, but I am running for office because I want to make a change in this world, in this community, that actually resonates with a lot of people. But that doesn't mean it comes without obstacles. So I'm excited to chat with a number of people who have done that specifically. They have run for office. They're not shying away from saying they are non religious, using whatever label it is they use. And I would encourage all of you, if you're watching this live, please consider donating to ASEO. That's the Association of Secular Elected Officials. I'll keep that up for a little bit here. And I'm going to bring on first the president and founder of ASEO, Leonard Pressburg, who I believe also happens to be on the Fayette County School Board in Georgia. But Leonard, hey, how are you?
I am great, Heaven. Thank you so much for doing this for us. We
Absolutely.
really appreciate it.
Let me give you the floor for a little bit here so you could tell everyone about the organization. And I just want to reiterate, if you're watching this live and you have any comments, leave them in the comment threads. And when I am chatting with various people, we could bring them up and ask them to the people themselves. So thanks so much. Leonard, the floor is yours. And I'm going to remove this banner. I'm going to remove myself so you could talk here.
Again, thank you so much, Heaven, for having us. I'm going to give you just a little bit of background on the association and how we came to form it, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Heaven and get to what we're all sort of interested in hearing today is him having conversations with elected officials all across the country and hearing their stories about being non-religious and how that has worked in the political sphere. So about, uh, 10, 15 years ago, I ended up on the Fayette County, Georgia, just south of Atlanta, school board. I happened to be appointed to the office before I ever ran. It was a vacancy, and pretty immediately after, I was faced with questions about what my religious beliefs were and where I went to church and whether it was appropriate for me to serve in an elected capacity in my community because I don't know if you can tell by my name or perhaps my look, I am not Christian. Um, and I sort of didn't know how to face those questions, how to answer those questions. Always felt like being an atheist, is that big political taboo. And as I, went through more than a decade in office and sort of modified how I talked about being an atheist and what that meant to me. Uh, I know there's other people out there who are struggling with the same things I were. We know being non religious is the biggest growing demographic in the country, but we also know that there's only one out of 538 members of Congress who is openly non-religious. So working with Ron Millar at the Center for Free Thought Equality, who's done a lot of great work in this area, Sarah Levin at Secular Strategies, we formed ASEO to connect, educate, and support elected officials at all levels of government across the United States. So we do things like help identify secular elected officials. We go out where elected officials gather at conferences like the National School Boards Association, the National Conference of State Legislators, things like that, out there meeting people, letting them know that we exist, that we are out there to help educate them. We run regular education seminars. We are working on a model policy bank to support good policies in all areas, not just separation of church state issues. We work with legislators to form state legislative caucuses like the Secular Government Caucus in Minnesota and the caucus in New Hampshire, like the Congressional Free Thought Caucus at the national level, to again work with our religious allies and support the separation of church and state and good policies based on science and reason. And we are working to hopefully move towards having a conference for secular elected officials, hopefully in the future. So all of these things, of course, take money, and we need that money to be out there in front of elected officials to support policies, to write policies, to get them passed, etc. So I'm going to point to the link. Please donate. And what we want to do today is I'm going to turn it back over to Hemet, and we're just going to talk to some ASCO members from across the country, hear their stories about being non-religious in office and how that has gone from them, and learn about our diverse members. So there's the quick overview. And again, Hemet, thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to you.
That sounds good. Before I let you go, let me ask you, as just a standard question, have you found through the people you've talked to that it is easier for openly non-religious candidates to run these days for any level of office, or are the obstacles the same as they always have been?
I definitely think it's easier. Of course, a lot depends on where in the country you are and what kind of area it is. But we know, even in the reddest states, even in the Bible Belt, the fastest growing demographic still is the non-religious. And I think we're sort of behind the times in our thinking that it's this big taboo, that it certainly was, but I don't think it is anymore. I think the changing demographics, the growing awareness of not just secular people, but other religious people about the threat of Christian nationalism, highlighting sort of the religion state separation issue. And the fact that I think more people are looking for politicians who are authentic and sort of getting away from that, Teflon politician who, answers all their questions with, non-answers. I think people are looking for authenticity and people who are willing to say what they believe and connect those beliefs to why they would be a good public official.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for introducing ASCO to everybody. And I guess let me start out by introducing my first guest. So, Leonard, I'm going to say goodbye to you for now, and I'll see you in a little bit. The first person I'm going to bring here is Christiana De Leon, who is both an ASEO board member, a city council member, and now a candidate for state legislature in Washington state. So here she is. Christiana, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. I'm literally in my element right now, because I'm actually calling to you from this car because later on I'm actually in Olympia and we'll be doing some additional follow-up on some work related to accountability for people who sexually assaulted people as clergy members, right? So we're actually going to be working with survivors later on today for that. So Anyway, that's where I'm coming to you live from a parking lot in Olympia. Hi, it's so good to talk to you here.
You too. So we caught you at a very busy time, but I appreciate you making time for this. I have a few questions, but I guess for the people who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got involved in politics, and why ASEO matters to you? And I'm gonna do the hard job of saying you have like a minute and a half, so I can get
Oh,
to
no.
questions.
Okay, so I'm in Black Diamond, Washington, which is a small town where you can see Seattle from the hill, and it's definitely a world away. So a lot of what got me involved in running for office was really just that I was the burned out teacher who really still wanted to make an impact in my community in really meaningful ways and continue that work. And then in terms of being secular or being an atheist and being a humanist, this was something that I never hid. And yet, during my time in office, and especially because I ran for office in 2019, and as it turned out, against an actual leader of a hate group and a white Christian nationalist organization, the Washington 3%. You may have seen them on Borat, actually, same group. But anyway, I realized I had to win this. And even more, I realized that once I was in office, it was really critical that I also get more involved as a member of the secular community, particularly because I've seen the exact opposite of what happens when you have unchecked white Christian nationalism in government. So to me, this was an all hands on deck thing to really make sure that every single one of us with our different backgrounds and perspectives, and religions or no religion, are still standing up to this threat and really advancing our shared values at the same time. So I've been really thrilled to be part of ASEO, not only just to find community and find that sort of support network, but also to just really, again, advance the kinds of policies that I think speak to all of us in a lot better ways.
Let me ask you, has that actually come up at all in your races? Because it sounds like you're motivated by your passion for these causes, for these policies. Not so much, I mean, you're not trying to be an atheist in public office. You're trying to be someone who
Right.
has strong feelings about these issues. Oh, and you happen to be an atheist. But has that ever come up in any of the campaigns you've run? Has anyone tried to use it against you?
I mean, we'll find out this time around, won't we? But I mean, in terms of running in 2019, and then I ran actually unopposed in 2023, which is wild to me, absolutely wild. I have to say that, if there's been any negativity, it has been sort of Pacific Northwest, passive aggressive, nice. So it's hard to say, but I just think, at the end of the day, too, I've at least seen in 2019, I did run with a political affiliation, which is also unheard of in my city. That's the best parallel that I can draw, is that came up in conversation, good and negative, of course. But even more, like, people create these narratives about what it's like to be secular, regardless of whether or not you are. We hear all these quote unquote accusations of, calling somebody an atheist. And it's like, well, actually, I am one. And to your same point, it's like, yeah, I care about roads, or I care about public education, or I care about health and human services, while being atheist. Like, it's one of those ands that I think it's an interesting one to navigate, but it hasn't explicitly come up, which is kind of surprising, but time will tell, I suppose.
So let's play devil's advocate then. Let's say it does come up and someone says, I'm thinking about voting for you, but I am concerned that maybe you don't share my moral compass, even if you are, my political party or anything like that. Do you ever think about, how would I respond to that person? How can I convince them that voting for me is in their best interest, and also that, we still share values or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is absolutely the most important thing of any sort of work, I think, as a secular elected official is, there is still, I mean, I don't want to pretend like there isn't stigma. And at the same time, that's always informed me of how do I approach this through a solidarity lens, and that means, for example, like when I was talking about working with survivors, there are people who, who still practice their religion, but they just want accountability for clergy who did harm, and that's the lens where it's like, and I'm here to support you, knowing that this is still, a deeply held religious belief. You just want accountability. And I think that's fair. I live in a very increasingly diversifying part of the country. I grew up in what's now the ethnically seventh most diverse city in the nation. And it's one of those things where it's like, that means that you're coming with a lot of different religious backgrounds and ideals. And So to me, I think the fact that I understand that I'm not part of a predominant, Christian identity is actually making me more informed about how we make sure we take care of all of us, regardless of religion. The boundaries and that includes with Christians who want to work for a better community. Where I draw the boundary is with white Christian nationalism. And that should absolutely not be synonymous with really just, I think, even just people's religious identities writ large, but obviously and especially with policy. So that's the lens I talk about. Is it's not for me a place of antagonism. It's a place of saying, you come with your deeply held beliefs, and here are mine. And how do we work together to kind of, build that bridge, so to speak, and really work on the same shared goals?
Every time I think about the big culture war issues or white Christian nationalism, it seems like it's an issue that only crops up in the US Congress, maybe state legislatures, things like that. I don't really imagine it hitting city councils. I mean, I have seen school boards have some issues with stuff, but I don't see it that much in city council. I am wondering, as a humanist, we see that on your pendant and everything, what role does your non-religiosity play when a lot of the issues I imagine you have to deal with are hyper local? They involve roads, they involve bringing businesses into your community. So do those worlds actually overlap?
In a lot of ways, I think so, and especially because I think about, again, how our values inform the policy we create. And so for me, it's, it might be like, I often like to say, like, thoughts and prayers don't fix potholes. And so for me, I think about that intersection in terms of, for example, my own humanist beliefs of saying, I don't believe that there is any life after this one. And so for me, it's like, how do I create policy that really speaks to the fact that if we only have this one life to live, how do we make sure that we have the best opportunity for as many people as possible to have their best quality of life as possible? So it's a lot of those kinds of quantifiers that for me reflect that there's still a place for being secular, for being an atheist, for being a free thinker, however you describe yourself, in government. Because, I don't say I'm going to advance, quote unquote, specifically, explicitly something atheist. And yet knowing that I have these values and that they are determining how I do my work is really important to me. So, I mean, I guess it sort of answers your question. And then at the same time, again, I had to serve in my office with two out white Christian nationalist members of this hate group. Like, not just one, but two. It's a very long story that included a reappointment of the person I defeated. But I think that's to that same point of, like, I've also seen where people do try to legislate, and they do try to forthright put their own religious ideas explicitly into government places, whether those are, your bread and butter atheist issues like, 10 commandments in public places, or it's in more subtle ways that could mean, you deny a healthcare clinic because maybe they might, provide, reproductive care. Oh my goodness. So, there's a lot of ways to I think still be part of that conversation in a way that's really respecting, effective to representing all people, not just quote unquote one religious or non-religious group.
So you have then run for city council, and now you're running for the legislature. In terms of how you are campaigning, has anything changed besides like a greater geographical area? Are you doing things very differently to reach a broader base of voters?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm actually really excited to have this opportunity. It started with people who were in my local community, community leaders who just said, why aren't you running? And I was like, I don't know if it's in the cards. And essentially they were like, well, we'll make it happen. And so I'm really grateful I have that opportunity because it really is about how I get to expand the conversation. A lot of my things that I'm really passionate about are also state focused, but have a lot of tie-ins with local government. So for example, public education is first and foremost in my mind, as well as we have a really wonky tax system out here that's pretty inequitable. So like those are the kinds of things where I get to naturally talk about more issues, and the way that it's still like integrating and being informed by being atheist, by being a humanist is really, really exciting for me. So I think it comes naturally in some cases because you just have more issues to talk about. And through that, there's more coalitions to build. And, case in point, getting out here and doing this more, and especially being more mindful about time spent, say, for example, right now in Olympia, means I get to be involved in even more myriad issues. And I'm so excited because that's what gets me out of bed in the morning is policy. It's very cool.
You are a policy wonk, and I love it. Before I let you go, let me just ask you, as an ASEO board member, why is this group important to you? Why should people support it? And I'll leave the link down here for anyone interested
Yes.
in donating.
Yes, thank you so much. So, again, I will absolutely plug why this is such a fantastic organization to support. And first, I'd say, we have really been longing for something like this for a while, where we have an actual concerted effort to bring all of the representation that's within the secular community, because we're definitely far from a monolith, and put that out into the ether of our political discourse. So that's one reason, is it just is going to continue to build out our visibility in the greater communities, both locally. I can tell you how much locally this has made an impact, but then nationwide. And that's also to Leonard's point earlier about the conferences we can attend. And I will say, being at one of those conferences we could attend, and especially I think it was at the American Humanist Association's one, that's where we really hatched this inspiration and this idea to create a policy hub, so that just like you see all these really bad in different state legislatures and school boards and all of these places where you see this sort of a template for really harmful policy that's very narrow in focus. And we could go, we talk till the cows come home about how bad white Christian nationalism is, but this is like the antithesis of saying, here are some policies that we, speaks to our members' values, especially when it comes to secular issues, but also in topics that may not directly seem as connected, but things like, another thing I was really valuing in my city work is on therapeutic courts and alternatives to stringent drug sentences, and giving people an accountability to kind of have that spiral up as opposed to getting into recidivism. So those kinds of policy hubs where we're talking and conversing and sharing these templates and going to meetings and, making sure that people put a name and a face to something that's still stigmatized is really important. So, I will tell you, at least as a city council member, I think I make somewhere around $140 a month. So this is definitely a labor of love. And I could think that a lot of local electeds can also attest to similar things where we do this because we're absolutely out of our minds and out of our pocketbooks. So whatever you can do to help us is amazing.
Thank you for that. I would say two things to that. One is the idea of having conferences of secular elected officials. Having been to a few secular conferences over many years, one thing that is really cool about them is people walk away from them really inspired and wanting to be active. And I imagine if you get a group of people running for office, wanting to run for office in a place together, I can only imagine what they take back with them, how eager they are to do that sort of thing, which would be fascinating. And the other side to that with ASCO is that, unlike those playbooks you mentioned on the other side, where it's very much public policies that, in my opinion, hurt a lot of people, the policies you're talking about are not designed to make people non-religious. That's not the end goal.
Right.
It's
Right.
using reason-based policies to say, how can we help as many people as possible? And that's a very different goal than what I guess political opponents might say.
That's right. We're definitely here to make that table bigger and not to push people out of it, or I don't know, throw tomatoes, or however you want to take that analogy further. But exactly right. Yeah, we are here to try to make good policy while being atheist secular people in general. And that's, again, in solidarity with people who are Muslim, who are Sikh, who are Jewish, who practice Christianity and are just wanting to say no to the detrimental effects of this encroaching fascism that we're seeing from our political opponents.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And for anyone interested in learning more about you, where can they go?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so at least in terms of my city work, you can find me there in City of Black Diamond. But in terms of say the campaign side, all of my my website is christianadeleon.com, and all of my social media handles are KDL for LD5, not a number 4 that look like a license plate, but KDL for LD5 because I'm running for the Legislative District 5. So that's a little bit of where you can find me, and otherwise, find me at an ASEO event. That's obviously the most important answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christiana.
Thanks so much. Take care. Thanks.
All right. I'm gonna keep going here. The next person I wanted to talk to is Bob Carter. Bob Carter is actually a member of the Montana House of Representatives. He was first elected in 2022. This is his first term in office, and I'm going to bring him in right now. Here we go. And I'm going to remove Christiana. There we go. Bob, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself here?
Hi, Hammond. Oh, it's so great to be here. Bob Carter, representative in Montana. I was born and grew up here. I went to elementary and high school here in Montana. I worked farms and ranches growing up. I went to university here, got my degree eventually in computer science with math and finance emphasis, and after a great career in Silicon Valley and doing all the fun stuff that I like doing, I finally met someone I wanted to marry, and we decided to have kids. And when we decided to have kids, my wife was just starting her career, and she said, well, one of us needs to dedicate ourselves to taking care of the kids. We're not going to let somebody else do it, and I'm sure you're going to do a great job. And I said, yes, ma'am. And so, yeah, I started getting involved here 2 decades ago in, regular dad type things as a primary caregiver, childcare, being a volunteer in the preschool classroom, and then getting on the school board or on the preschool board started, and then being president of the preschool board, and then finally, as the kids migrated into elementary school, I ran for a school board member and spent, 12 years or so as a school board member. And then when our beloved senator and representative in the area all termed out, I decided the next step in that progress for me was to run for state legislator. And here I am today.
That's fantastic. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of trajectory, but it makes sense. You're starting very local, like with your
Right.
family, and it just steps up there. I feel like I can say this. I'm not making any ASEO is not a political partisan organization, I should say, but I am curious, when you have run, especially for the state legislature, one of the things about you is you have not hid the fact that you are non-theistic, but do you think voters were more disturbed by something like that, or something like the D next to your name on the ballot?
So being so open about my theistic flavors, I guess you could say, I approach it as being a scientist. Excuse me. And being a scientist, I try to do things in an evidence-based way. And during my campaigning as a school board member and then as a state legislator, I had so many people that identified as Christian, number one, or fill in the blank religion. And I thought, why would I hide my theistic views and stuff if all these people are coming out and saying, hey, like other people say, what church do you go to, and things like that. And I went through the progression back in high school and in college. My folks were very Catholic. They tried to push that on me. None of it, made sense to me at all. The discrepancies in the Bible, I read the Bible many times, and I found as a high school student discrepancies. And then getting off to college, I met people who were Jewish or Catholic, or they were Hindi or Buddhist. And I finally, after years of thought and consideration, decided, well, they all can't be right. And if they're not all right, there's probably not one of them that's wrong. They're probably all wrong. And so I moved forward with that. And as an evidence-based person, I would like to think of myself as agnostic, that if something came up and said, hey, this is obviously supernatural based, then I would believe that. But so far, it's never happened. And yet I would talk to people that, would ask me, to their church, to talk to people in their church. Or I'd have people reach out to me and say, hey, are you Christian, or are you, I hear you're an atheist. And I would say, yeah, I don't have a belief. I don't believe in any supernatural. And people, I think since I was so forthcoming about it, that people appreciated that. And the fact that I would embrace, you believe whatever you want. I'm not telling you you're right or wrong. I'm doing what I think is right for me, just like you should do what's right for your family. And don't tell me what's right for my family. I won't tell you. We'll try to get along here and move forward. And so that's really worked out really well for me. And I would say most people, I've had a bunch of people say, I probably won't vote for you, but I'd sure like to have a beer with you. Or, come and talk to our Bible group. And in fact, our legislature has a 6:30 a.m. Bible study in the Capitol building. And I attend all those too, and I don't know if people realize that I'm not one that believes like them, but they accept me and I accept them. And I think this would be a better world if we all did that.
Let me ask you about that legislature. Montana is a deeply red state. And one of the questions I have as a scientist, as an atheist, as a Democrat, what can you accomplish by having your voice in the mix there, even if you can't necessarily, you don't have the numbers to pass the bills you want? I'm wondering if someone is asking, like, I want to run, but it's a very red area I'm in, what's the point?
Right. And that's a super fair question. Why would I run in a place that is deeply red and I have little choice? I think what that does is, one, it brings another voice to the table. And that voice is so important because now you don't have just a single voice just spewing things that may or may not be true. Now what you do is you have another voice. And I think having that multitude of voices moderates everybody and it brings everybody closer to the center. And my personal views are probably a little bit different than my political views. I would say I am more of a centric person politically than I am in personal. And so, bringing that to the table and then having the support network that's needed in order to be able to do that. And the far right and the far left, they're not going to be able to represent as many people as you can from the center. And so being able to have that discussion with people, having that civil dialogue with people, I think brings people together a lot better than just hearing one side from either side, one view from either side.
It sounds like you're saying, so you moderate yourself a little bit because of your surroundings, but maybe by having your voice in the mix, you're kind of moderating some of them as well.
No question, right?
This is a question from a viewer right now. It would be nice to hear the strategies to counter dominionism, integralism, Christian nationalism, given the massive crisis about that, especially with regards to LGBTQ criminalization in a red state where there might be a lot of bills that are being proposed that hurt LGBTQ people, women, trans people. What can you bring to the mix that might try to either stop those bills or at least delay them or moderate them in any way? Have you had any stories in your year in office so far of those kinds of successes, if they exist?
Right. So that's a great question. And that's something that we are battling with, having that dialogue with quite a bit. The Democrats in Montana are in a super minority right now. The Republicans have a super majority. And so it's hard to get our core values heard and passed. But what we can do is we can bring a voice to those that don't have a voice. In our caucus, in the Democratic caucus, we have people of all lifestyles and preferences, and they, right behind me is Zoe Zephyr. Zoe Zephyr is a trans woman who has been very outspoken. I've got several people who identify as queer that sit in our caucus as well. And these people are so strong and they're so brave and they're very articulate, and they go out there and they put themselves out there, and they're fabulous. They are just the people that everybody else wants to look up to, and they're brave, and it's wonderful to see where society is moving. And unfortunately, the folks that are trying to discriminate against people like that, you can see where the trajectory is going. Look at where we are, in the last 70 years. At one time here, people couldn't vote. If you were an atheist, you could not hold office in, I want to say, half the states in the United States. Women, Jeanette Rankin was one of the first people in Montana, or from Montana, that was elected to the U.S. Congress. And so we're getting there. Unfortunately, folks that are trying to hold people back, all it's doing is delaying the inevitable. And we look at where Europe has gone with religion, and where United States is going with religion. It's great to believe in something that you want to believe in. Just don't try to push that out on everybody else. And we talk about freedoms here and local control, and yet there's so much battle out there to try to stifle those freedoms and stifle that local control. Somebody who does not believe like you and I, they're not hurting you and I. And so just let them do what they want to do and what they are going to do. And let's not try to micromanage what other people's lives are taking when it's not affecting you.
Yeah, and I'm sure people appreciate anytime people like you or Zoe Zephyr speak out against things like that, because having that voice there matters a lot when it comes to representation, no matter who you are. One last political question for you. One thing I saw when I was doing my own research is, you won your Democratic primary with, I think, under 1,000 votes. You won your election with like 3,000 votes because of the geographical distribution and stuff in Montana. And I'm wondering, when the number of votes you need to win an election for like state house is, I guess, in the thousands as opposed to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, does that change how you campaign, because maybe you can make more face-to-face connections and you can get to know these people a lot better?
Right. What's interesting about Montana is every district is the same size and population, and yet the geographic distribution is sometimes huge. I mean, we've got some House districts or Senate districts that are larger than some states out on the East Coast. And so I'm fortunate to be on the edge of a very urban area here in Missoula, Montana. And so I can see my whole district on a bicycle. But there's, for example, the Senate district, it goes over the side of the mountain next door and up the road and out the river. And some of these things have, thousands of square miles. And so our senator who had this seat 2 terms ago, she won Senator Sands won her seat by 30 votes. And so what's really nice about campaigning here in Montana is most of these can be done on foot, and there's still a lot of door knocking. I would say I probably, out of the 10,000 people in my district, I probably knocked on 7,000 doors or so during my primary and during my campaign. And so getting to know those people and being able to put a face to your elected official is really important. And that still happens all the time here in our state with the size of the electorate that we have here. And so, it's really boots on the ground is so important here, for whether it be city council or school board member or for a House or Senate district. And that really makes the difference, because for my primary opponent, who is a fantastic person, he's actually the president of the Missoula area Democrats right now. He outspent me, and a lot of these campaigns, it's not just money. It really is the personal feeling that people have for you.
And if you can get elected as an atheist, that means you are making that personal connection because people get to know you and not just a label, right? Can you tell us really quick before I let you go, why is ASEO important to you? Why would you encourage people to support it? And again, I'll leave the link down here for anyone interested.
When I started doing this, I knew of nothing for support for folks that did not have a church behind them. When I was running as a candidate, Danny Choriki is a city council member in Billings, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, you know what? I think you might be the second openly atheist person elected in the state," and he was the first one. And he pointed it out to me, and looking at the resources that are available and the support and being able to see a bunch of people that are able to help out and agree with you, and you can bounce ideas off of, and in some places you might not be able to or might not want to, wear your humanist tendencies on your sleeve, and find out the hard way, I guess, by losing an election. But getting out there and knowing that, hey, this is the wave of the future, and this is where things are going. Like I was talking about with that trajectory, we're going to be there, and let's try to help folks out while we can at the grassroots level, and it's going to pay us back, in spades here in the next decade. And again, with the religious reference, we're not doing something for an afterlife. We've got a certain amount of time, and we need to do it now, and we need to focus on the time that we have now. And if you look at the Christian nationalist tendencies in the country here, they really need something to combat that. And even though it's a minority of the folks in the states, it's a very vocal minority, and we need to be able to counter that with something. And ASEO is a great way to counter that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people learn more about you if they are interested in supporting you in the future?
I have a campaign website that's cartermt.us, CARTERMT.us. And thanks, Hammett. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you, and keep up the great work.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it. All right. We are going to move right along here. Again, you can leave your questions for any of these guests in the comments, and I'm doing my best to read through them and make sure they get to the right people. And as always, please consider donating to the Association of Secular Elected Officials. As you are watching this, it helps them out so we can have more events like this and get more people encouraged to not just vote, but to run for office in whatever part of the country they are in. All right. The next person I'm going to talk to here is Karina Quintanilla. She is the mayor of Palm Desert, California. She was elected to the city council in 2020, and because they rotate who's mayor among the council members, this past December, she was appointed mayor for the next year. She's also, I believe, the first Latina mayor in the city's history. Let me bring her in here. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It is morning my time. I know it's different time zones, so just greetings and happy Monday 2.0.
Good morning to you.
People are morning people, some are not. But I'm just happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And can you do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in running for public office yourself?
Sure thing. Long story short, I come from a long line of women that are movers and shakers and are driven to action based on the things that we see that need to be changed or the things that need to be supported. My great-grandmother, for example, brought running water, electricity, telephone, and founded the first health clinic in her very small town. And coming from those humble beginnings where you see the need and you know that you can be stronger together. In the city of Palm Desert, I was made aware by a former advisee. My previous career was an academic advisor, and she reached out and said, I know this is a big ask, but would you be willing to sue the city under the California Voter Rights Act? And I said, where do I sign? She was surprised that I didn't need convincing or an understanding of what it was. So we sued the city and campaigned during the pandemic, took 61% of the vote, becoming the first Latina and the youngest woman elected. And just actually yesterday, I announced that I will be seeking re-election for another 4 years. And I tell folks, not just a cultural and linguistic diversity, but economic diversity. My background is very different in that scope. In terms of getting to how I got here as a non-religious person, being that a lot of Latinos are born Catholic. We're Catholic by birth, not necessarily by choice. And you get the CEO Catholics, right? The Christmas and Easter only. And it was the big conversation within the family.
Can you actually, I know this is always a lengthy story for anybody, but I'm wondering if you could tell people about how you made that switch yourself and how you dealt with your family, and then if it has impacted any of the races you've run.
That's actually where I was going to go with that. One of my cousins is openly an atheist, and she was even featured on the LA Times and said, by the way, when I refer to the aunt that shamed me, that's your mom I was talking about. And it's been something we just kind of dance around and don't talk about in my family, but we made the agreement that we can't tell grandma. And that would be very disappointing to grandma, having been raised hyper Catholic. I mean, to the point that some of my earliest memories are in church. It was a very difficult thing to say, but that's on the family side of it. In the community, part of my philosophy as a leader is, honestly, I don't even wear my name tag most of the time. I want people to see me as a human being, as a member of the community, and then later they may find out, but I don't want them interacting with just the label or the name badge. In the same way that I don't bring in specifically, these are my views, this is what I don't believe, but it does come into some of the sessions where I'm in a position or on a board. So for example, read everything, okay? We have a lot of things that come through in the fine print. I was on a board where they were asking for $10,000 for language translation services. And being that English is my second language, that was crucial for me. The funds were to be used for a birth choice center. And the choice was dissuade from even talking about abortion, and the lies about having a RU486, the abortion pill reversal, which we know is not something you can reverse. And asking for funds from a foundation that gets a lot of public funding to use that led to a pretty lengthy discussion within that nonprofit board. And that's where, as community leaders and looking at the 501c3s, right? Not all of them are built the same. Not every church is the same. Not all churches are monoliths. Some are humanitarian in their missions, and others are evangelical, and who and how they engage in the community. Recently, I had a conversation or an email that came in, somebody requesting a peace poll, but specifically they said it as a result of what had happened in Israel and Hamas, and presenting it from that perspective of a religious ground, and saying, you know what, separation of church and state, and how to navigate that perspective and point versus the four others on the council. There was an incident, not an incident, but an occasion where there was a school that is a religious school, and I asked, their curriculum does include religious text and theology, and they wanted public funds to participate in an event. And I said, this is something that I don't believe in. And there was the discussion with the city attorney, and finding out where they said, well, this may be perceived as discrimination against Judaism. And if we don't do this, and how do you manage that middle ground? Because then we get into whether someone is culturally Catholic versus religiously practicing, in the same with cultural Judaism versus a practicing Judaism. So those fine identities of whether, again, you're going to church on the holidays or for Christmas, or if you just celebrate Christmas and you enjoy the celebration without the core religious view of it. And that's, I think, where we have to be firm in what we believe. And I heard earlier, trying to look at the notes that I had while I was reading. So Bob had mentioned being on the school board, and school board gets overlooked a lot. We talk about national, state, municipal, but the school board is a really big crux of where some of these issues are. I mean, you'd almost think that we're back in 1925 with the Scopes trial, the monkey trials in Tennessee. And the school boards have the ability to help drive curriculum and who's being included, who's being shut out, who we're silencing, to go back from the traditional values, right? So the tradition of who you're putting back in the closet and who you're relegating to the kitchen. So again, looking at where we're going, how we're getting there, and how we can be more inclusive of the believers and the non-believers. So for example, in advocating for the unsheltered, whether you call them unsheltered or unhoused, which I think has more of a dignity versus just the homeless. I'm sure they had a home at one place. They have somewhere that they may call home in the meantime, and creating an interfaith alliance to create that, because then you're using all of the church networks and the people that donate. Not all of them are tax shelters, right? Some of them really are doing this from a humanitarian standpoint, but to be able to work with those in that crux and say, but we also have to have secular advocacy. Some of these people may not want to go to a shelter if, when you walk in, and I went to that one, you've got a 60, 70 foot cross.
Sure. You're
Possibly someone that is experiencing religious trauma that got you there. For example, we have a very high LGBTQ plus overrepresentation in our area that are homeless. And so some of them are there because their families say either, don't say gay, pray the gay away. And now you're telling me that you're going to offer me a bed and a warm meal, but you're going to pray over me. And how do we support everyone along the way?
It sounds like one of the things you're saying is, one, it pays to be skeptical in some ways, because you're reading through all that fine print and everything, making sure the right things are being done. But also you have this awareness of what people may have come from that I think I don't hear that much from a lot of religious politicians at any level. And it's not that they can't be. There are plenty of amazing ones, but having that perspective is really important when you're having these discussions, because obviously you're not trying to exclude faith groups from getting involved in helping do these humanitarian things. Speaking of which, when I was reading up on your bio, one of the things that was such a pleasant surprise that I learned about you, whenever I read like politicians, like the about pages on their candidate pages, they talk about, sure, their family, maybe their church, something like that. One thing you've talked about a lot is how much blood you have donated, how much marrow you have donated, as well as your advocacy for organ donation. And I found that to be like really an extension of your own humanism. Can you talk more about that and why that's so important to you?
Absolutely. Just as Christiana said, thoughts and prayers don't fill potholes. Thoughts and prayers aren't always there. And, just like Jesus is at the Super Bowl, not just in the commercials, but people that are praying to recover money or make money. When they say, well, we're going to pray that, you get better because religion made you better. But what about all the people that died of the same diagnosis, right? Where are we looking at what makes us feel good to know that there may or may not be a greater energy, being, afterlife? That's all I know is I'm a good person in the today, because that's all I know today. I'm not going to be a person based on what there is or is not in the tomorrow. As far as I'm concerned, heaven and hell exist here. Whether it's something that you've achieved, whether it's something you work for, whether it's where you ended up, those are things that exist here in the now and not the after. And for even still to this day, right? I don't make a lot of money individually, just as Christiana mentioned, we don't get paid a lot of money in elected office. So I don't have the money to give philanthropy, but my body is going to regenerate blood. And in 72 hours, you replenish your platelets. And some folks are able to give that and help with scarring, and it goes right over to the cancer center. So that is something that I go and I give my time. I have donated 18 gallons now. I've been an advocate for bone marrow donors, for the organ registry, especially with communities of color. Biracial, multiracial individuals have an even less chance of getting matched. So those are crucial for me to ensure that we are representing. Again, science is there. We support science, we support facts, and doing this collectively.
That's it. It's inspirational, and I think I'm seeing a lot of commenters say the same thing. Just to close this up, can you tell us about why ASCO is important to you and why you think people should support it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that having any space that cultivates leadership where you don't have to follow a set path, where it was mentioned before that sometimes churches are who bring the awareness of who they're pushing, who they're advocating to serve as a platform for the beliefs that they would like to continue. Just as Christiana mentioned, serving with Christian nationalists, I can't imagine how incredibly tough that must be. And sorry, I was thinking, and ADHD brought me in different directions. Okay, so the value of having a space that encourages folks and say, you don't have to do that. Part of leadership is knowing where to lead instead of follow. But you can't be a leader if there's no one to follow you. And a quick example in a contentious issue we had on the council, I finally had it with the arguing, and I said, okay, 4 of you are going in one direction. I don't mind being the thumb. I'll stand out on the side. City manager pulled me over after and he said, Karina, I don't want you to feel like the thumb. And I said, oh, but you're mistaken. You can't do anything without the thumb. The thumb grips, the thumb grabs, the thumb pulls. So it is okay to stand aside. It is okay to go to the component where you're standing out on your own. And as long as you can give the understanding of why, you can bring people along to listen to you. They don't have to agree. But part of what democracy is everyone coming together to be heard.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for telling people about you. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Right now, the most updated information is on my website, elect, like election, elect, and my first name, Karina.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and good luck with your re-election campaign as well.
Thank you. Health, happiness, and wellness to you, your loved ones, and all of those that are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. The last person I want to introduce you all to is Heather Waters. She is a town councilor in Manlius, New York, which is in the heart of the state geographically, kind of close to Syracuse. Why am I telling you that? She could tell you all of that. She was first elected in 2019, and I believe she began her most recent 3-year term this January. So let me get Karina here. There we go. Heather, nice to see you. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what got you involved in public service as well?
Absolutely. And I hope you can hear me over the fire alarm that's actually right behind me. Yeah, I ran for office in 2019 and was elected, started serving in January of 2020. Nothing going on then, right? And we were our cohort that got elected, we were Democrats that were running against an all Republican board that had been there for ages. And so we flipped the majority of the board to Democrats in in that 2019 election. And it changed things because people had thought of the town as extremely conservative, a bedroom community for Syracuse, and didn't understand that the whole town had been changing and had been changing for decades, but certainly electorally from like 2009 on. And so we were a sign of the times being elected. We spent a lot of time door to door. So I was sworn in, and I, along with my colleague John and my colleague Elaine, we all swore ourselves in on the town code book instead of the Bible. And that's really what introduced us to the Center for Free Thought Equality and other organizations that were curious, about how this all came to be. And honestly, we just it's who we are. I actually live in Fayetteville, New York, which is in the town of Manlius, and that's where Matilda Joslyn Gage lived and worked for many years. She's the author of Woman, Church, and State from 1893. And she was an abolitionist and a suffragist, and broke with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and with Susan B. Anthony on the issue of religion. She linked, and I'm an avid feminist, and she had linked misogyny to organized religion. So that's sort of where I come from, and where my own sort of, atheism and leaning towards humanism tendencies really were grounded in sort of understanding the marginalization of folks, particularly women, through religion. So I was sworn in and started working on the comprehensive plan, and had to go deeply working in the community and bringing people together.
That's fantastic. I imagine you were intrigued by a lot of this stuff as a spectator, as someone who goes to, town council meetings, things like that. When you were on the other side and you were able to make decisions on behalf of people, what changed? Did you notice anything that you didn't know going into it? Did anything surprise you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the reliance that we have on the professional staff, our town clerk in particular, and the people who have to make do with these very lean budgets, because of course we're all crushed under the cost of healthcare for all of our public servants and retired public servants. So, you have such a to make real change, you have to raise grant funding, you have to be collaborative. And so the partisanship sort of influences things, I think, for some folks, but it has to end at the door in some ways, because you have to work with everyone in order to get things done.
Let me ask you about the partisanship in general. I said this earlier, but I imagine that plays a bigger role. Partisanship, religious label, all that stuff, that plays a bigger role the higher up you go in the political chain. If you're sitting on a city council, a town council, my assumption is that those things matter a lot less, because you're not making those types of decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the big issues confronting you right now in your community? What are the things you're all debating and discussing? And when there are differences of opinion, what are those based on?
Well, I think it's this idea of being insular as a community and having a fear-based approach, even with sidewalks, there was a general sense of not wanting sidewalks in this, this community that was pretty white and pretty affluent, because the idea was people without cars who would be walking along them, and it was racism, basically. This idea of not thinking about needing sidewalks for our whole community and what they do, but wanting to keep people out and confronting issues. We had to confront things like the rest of the country. In 2020, we had to look at how our community policing was going. We had to look at sort of whether our housing was always fair, and it wasn't. We had racial covenants inside some of the housing communities' documents, and we'd never faced any of that. How pink lining happened for, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. And so I feel a real responsibility to represent and also make sure that youth in our community understand and have someone they can see that's, in their community that is always making sure there's space for and recognition for who people are and their various identities and ways of being in the world. So those are some of the issues. And then something really big just happened to us. And it was really interesting. We got a request from a private school to have a police officer, so a special, patrol officer inside the school, similar to the force that exists in the public school system, the public school systems actually that our town is a part of. So that meant that we would have public, not retired officers doing overtime work or being paid individually. People are still affiliated with retired officers or off-duty officers doing patrolling, but an actual police officer in the private school, the Catholic school as it is. And we do not see how it's constitutional by New York State, but certainly also, have a concern about undermining sort of the support for public schools. The school would say, well, we're going to pay and underwrite, this cost for the town. So how is it not fair? And then they haven't gone ahead and telegraphed all the equity issues there that could be for folks and for other schools. But that immediately set off a question about, well, who are these people that don't think that our children should be safe? And a number of us, people are aware of the fact that we would not happen to send our own children to a number of us to this Catholic school and to schools with a religious affiliation, and thought that it was about a personal agenda. And so that's why I think that, it's really, really important for ASEO to exist, because we could go to our ACLU colleagues and say, how does this work, on a larger scale? And we can go to the comptroller and talk about the policy issues and the alignment with what our purpose is as a local government. But we didn't have anyone to talk to about the fact that people thought we were suddenly bad human beings because we didn't want to prevent school shootings, for example, at a school that had a religious affiliation.
It's very easy to pin the blame on you don't care about kids when it's a very different issue that you're dealing with. You mentioned you're a member of the LGBTQ community, and I'm wondering, as a secular elected official as well, what is the power of that at any level of government? Like, have you talked to people who look up to you because of that? And I'm not saying that as like a humble brag to you or anything, but just I'm sure that means a lot to a lot of people. And what would you say to people who are thinking about running but worried about that aspect of them?
Well, there's a curiosity that you have to be understanding will come, and people are going to be curious about your life. I'm a bisexual woman who's married to a, heterosexual cis, male, right? And so they want to know everything, like, how can you be bi and be married and who knows why? And so there's the curiosity that you sort of have to be prepared and have some bandwidth for and decide, how you want to represent. But also it's really then deciding how you're going to be supportive of your own community and listen and understand. I thought that I wasn't gay enough to be open about who I was, because I thought I'd be stepping in front of somebody else who was more marginalized. As somebody who's running for office, who's trans, you name it. But then I realized I need the kids we have a way too high a rate of suicide and self-harm amongst, LGBTQ youth. They need as many people in the community advocating for them as possible. So that was sort of why that identity became part of my public identity. And then also, I think there's an urgency because the issues need to get addressed now. We can't wait around always. So we had to start looking at culturally how we welcomed folks and made sure that Pride Month meant something to us and we were acting. We had to, we understand that youth in our community are so clearly squarely focused on climate change. So our commitment to climate change represents, I think, our commitment to the now. And I heard other folks referencing that this idea of focusing on where we are now and making things better. And looking at our pain points now, we're in an important position to do that. And yeah, I think that's how it comes together. And also this idea of voting rights and voting access and voting rights comes into play with us because we're thinking of the immediate, what can we do to open up the space? So not making things exclusive. When we hold events in churches, it may be a way to come to the community, but we're not thinking about how the spaces might have a chilling effect for others and chilling effect for civic engagement. So we have to constantly be the nudges, I think, on that, to think, are we just leaning on this because it's easier for us to organize things this way? Or is it actually going to help us see the most people? And And so, I think about all of those things, and it's definitely related to opening up space for marginalized communities and people whose voices aren't as easily heard.
That sounds fantastic. And for you already alluded to this earlier, but why do you think people should support ASCO, and why is it important to you? And then I will let you go. And also, I'll ask you one question at the end then.
Well, support ASEO because you're not alone out there as a secular official or someone who wants to support secular officials. And this will give us an opportunity to benchmark, idea share, support each other, share good ideas, and, be prepared to meet the moment, in our communities.
And then, Heather, thank you so much for your time. And then, where can people learn more about you? Where can they go to find out more about you?
Sure. Thank you so much. Elect Heather Waters, and I'm really proud to be running with, to be a part of a core group of folks who are all part of the manliest Democrats. So if you're kind of interested in what's going on in upstate New York with these sleeper Democrats that have flipped the board, it's also happening in Rochester, New York. And an organization called Local Progress has been a great resource for a lot of us trying to do local work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. And with that, I think that is everyone who is here with us. I want to just encourage all of you who are watching to please donate once again to the Association of Secular Elected Officials. Before I sign off here, I'm going to throw it back to Leonard Pressburg, who is the president of the organization, for some last thoughts here. Leonard, hello.
Yeah, thank you again, Hammond, and I'm gonna point to the link, whatever direction it's on. Thank you, Christiana and Bob and Karina and Heather, and I hope what people heard today was, we heard people from literally all corners of the country who serve the public in lots of different ways. And we heard how they're using their humanist values, their values in science and reason to make their communities, their cities, their states better for all of the residents that live there. And the fact that, all of these people with incredibly different backgrounds and incredibly different places, right, share the fact that, we are not religious. We, don't go to church every Sunday and base our policies on, a particular book or a particular religious leader's commands. You can hear how we're trying to make the country better and how we're doing that, leading with those humanist values. And you also heard people who felt like they said when they got elected, and they also felt alone because, it has traditionally been a taboo in politics and something that we didn't talk to. But with the rising threats of Christian nationalism, with we know the biggest growing demographic in the country is the nuns. I think more and more people are realizing that, these particular different religious organizations are not providing them, the comfort and answers that are needed in today's multicultural, complex society where we need thoughtful people making policies trying to make the world better. And so please support us. Please support the work that we do to support these politicians in your communities all over the country that are working for you and trying to make this a better place to live. So
I'm right there with you. Yeah, thank you for putting this together. Thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to chat with me for this. Thanks to Sarah Levin for also helping organize everything. And to all of you, if you can donate, absolutely donate. If nothing else, please consider running for office. As you could see, it doesn't matter if you're in a very blue community or a red state. There are so many offices, and I think the thing that is challenging is so many people talk themselves out of running when it's right there, when you can make that sort of difference, especially if, like Heather was saying earlier, if you are really interested in that sort of policy, if you're interested in making a difference to your community, like everyone was talking about, there's no reason you shouldn't be running for office either, or school board, or whatever position it is. So thank you for making that happen, Leonard. And again, thank you to everyone who's been watching this. We'll have these clips online in the next few days, and please share them with whoever you think would want to watch them. Any final thoughts, Leonard?
No, thank you so much, and please again donate. And you're interested in running for office, please get involved. We're happy to help.
And if anyone is interested, you can go to secularofficials.org to learn more about ASEO as well. All right, and with that, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.